Hello guys, welcome to a new video of the first World Chess Championship of 1886. It's Wilhelm Steinitz against Johannes Zukertort, and today we're looking at game number 9. So in this game we see a beautiful Queen's Gambit accepted, in which Steinitz plays a beautiful positional game. Let's just dive straight into the game. Zukertort has the white pieces and he opens with d4. d5 by Steinitz and c4 the Queen's Gambit. Well, Steinitz has responded with c6 the Slav defense, knight to f6 and c5 the Tarrasch. But here he plays e6, knight to c3, knight to f6 and knight to f3. And here pawn takes, going into the Queen's Gambit accepted. Here you can play e3 or e4. Well, Zukertort plays e3, which does block his dark squared bishop. And here black has three good moves, either a6, c5 or bishop e7. Here Steinitz plays c5, the most challenging move, since after bishop takes we take your central pawn. And okay, you can take with the knight, but then your dark squared bishop is still blocked in. So pawn takes by Zukertort. But by playing pawn takes, we do create an isolated queen's pawn, an IQP, which can be a disadvantage on the long term. Now bishop e7, castles and castles. Queen to e2, perhaps wanting to bring the rook to d1, and knight b to d7. And the purpose of knight b to d7 is very clear. We cannot jump into those dark squares. We want to go to b6, attack your bishop with tempo, and also control the square in front of the pawn. Since with an isolated queen's pawn, you always want to defend the square in front of that pawn, since you do not want to allow white to push the pawn here. So Zukertort knows that Steinitz wants to play knight to b6 and attack his bishop, so he plays a prophylactic move, bishop b3, and knight to b6, bishop f4 and knight to d5, controlling the square in front of it. Also attacking our bishop, so the bishop drops back to g3. And here perhaps the best move is b6, bishop b7, bringing it on a beautiful diagonal. But here queen a5, attacking your knight twice, but simply rook to c1. Now bishop to d7. And the knight jumps into e5, attacking your bishop. Simply rook to d8. And okay, we can take the bishop here and get one of your bishops, so we keep the bishop pair. But by taking the bishop, we would have rook takes, and the rooks are doubling and looking towards your weak pawn. So Zukertort is not interested in taking the pawn. He plays queen to f3, in which we have a double attack on your weak f7 pawn later on. So bishop drops back to e8, defending the pawn. Now rook to e1, developing our other rook, and rook a to c8. And now all the pieces are developed. So here Zukertort plays bishop h4, having some more pressure on the knight, the bishop and the rook. And here an interesting decision by Steinitz. He sees that after knight takes and pawn takes, okay, we make sure that you do not have an isolated pawn anymore, but we keep this pressure on those two pawns, from which one of those will be weak. If you push c4, the d pawn will be weak, and if you do not push the pawn, then the c pawn will be weak. So what to do? Well, after b takes c3, Steinitz brings back his queen, defending his bishop. Queen d3, centralizing our queen. And now the knight jumps in. Here bishop takes and taking with the queen, still keeping control of the dark squares. Well, what to do as Zukertort now? Perhaps the best move would be c4, knight to f4, queen to e3 since it was attacked, queen to f6, g3, knight to g6 and f4. Knight takes and f takes, queen has to move and play on the f line, and white has a fine position here. But actually what happened is not pushing c4, but bishop takes d5. Now we have rook takes d5, c4, rook goes back, and still we keep this pawn weaknesses in the middle of the board for white. But Zukertort simply ignores those pawn weaknesses. He plays rook to e3, wanting to create his own attack. But that's a bit dangerous, since now black plays queen to d6, double attack on this pawn. you have to defend it with rook to d1. And the knight's defending the c4 square, so simply f6, kicking away the knight. Well, first rook to h3, threatening winning this pawn, but simply h6. Knight jumps back to g4. And after knight to g4, okay, it looks like we can sacrifice the knight and come in here. But that's not really a threat, since if you play a slow move like a6, knight takes doesn't work, since after pawn takes, rook takes, we have this really nice move, queen to e7, and everything is defended. So, okay, what does Steinitz do now? Well, he plays the best move in the position, queen to f4. And queen to f4 is a beautiful move. It defends, or actually attacks this pawn here. It defends the h6 pawn and also attacks the knight. So a beautiful move. Well, here Zukertort plays knight to e3. And now bishop a4. Steinitz is finding the best moves on the board, attacking the rook. But first rook to f3, attacking your queen. Queen goes back to d6, keeping the pressure on this weak pawn. And now rook to d2. And here Steinitz has a beautiful move. He actually plays bishop c6, which does give away the advantage, since after bishop to c6, we can simply push d5. And even if you take the pawn, we do not take it back with the pawn or the knight. We play knight to f5. Queen goes back to f8, and now we have play on the e file, on the g file here, double attack with the knight and the rook. And white is still fighting. But here, the best move would actually be f5. Since now white has no good moves in the position. He would have to maybe rotate his knight to d1, to c3, but that's very slow and we will slowly push our pawns. So that's why f5 is such a strong move. Bishop c6 here. But Zukertort doesn't play d5, which is the best move. He plays rook to g3, trying to still get into those light squares. But now Steinitz does find f5. And after f5, perhaps the best move for Zukertort is to push c5, kick away the queen to f8, maybe f4 here, knight to c4 and jump into e5. You still have some play in the position. But after f4, Zukertort makes a mistake. He plays rook to g6. And what's the purpose of rook to g6? Well, he wants to play knight takes f5, in which after pawn takes, winning the queen. Obviously Steinitz sees that, and he plays the best move in the position. Bishop e4, defending the pawn and also attacking your queen. Queen has to move. King h7, attacking your rook. First c5. You can see we have a double attack on this pawn as well, and we attack your queen. Here black has only one move to keep the advantage. I would say pause the video here and find the best move for black. Well, in this position it's not moving away the queen back to f8, because then we have rook takes e6 and white's doing fine. It's actually rook takes c5. Since after pawn takes, your rook is hanging. Well, here we have rook takes e6 anyway, attacking your queen, but now rook c1 check first, knight to d1, and here the queen jumps into f4 again. Beautiful square, attacking your rook. Now queen goes to b2, defending the rook. But now rook b1, attacking your queen, defended by the bishop. Queen goes to c3, still defending our rook, but now rook to c8, a beautiful move. If you take our rook, we have queen takes your rook, and this is very dangerous. So here, after rook to c8, we actually see rook takes e4, attacking your queen. And here there's only one move for Steinitz, and if he finds this move, Zukertort will resign the game. Pause the video again and find the winning move for black. Here, Steinitz plays queen takes e4. Since after queen takes e4, we are threatening checkmate on e1. So even if you take the rook here, it's checkmate, and there's basically nothing you can do. Even if you move away your queen, nothing to do for the e1 square. So Zukertort resigns the game. This was such a beautiful game by Steinitz, really playing the Queen's Gambit accepted in a beautiful way and outplaying Zukertort positionally. I hope you liked this video. If so, please like, subscribe or comment, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.